Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show that discusses all topics from a woman's point of view. We believe all women should be treated with respect at all times and in all places. Welcome to It's a Woman's World. My name is Beverly Crosby, and I'm going to be your host today. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to watch the second part of the WILPF. That means Women's International League of Peace and Freedom. We're going to watch that documentary, but we have a special treat. We have Terry Hawthorne that's going to join us and give us some more information about what's going on today. So, Terry, hello and welcome to the show.
Hi, Beverly. It's so good to see you today.
It's good to see you too, Terry. Terry, for the viewers' sake, and especially the ones that didn't get to see this last program, this is the second of 3 programs. Could you explain to them how the art committee came about, how you started in Beijing? I'll just let you take over and you can tell the viewers that, okay?
Okay, well, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom began to organize to bring women to the 1995 United Nations Conference on Women in Beijing, China. And we had meetings. We had pre-meetings before the conference, getting ready to prepare for the platform for action, the social justice plan for global women. And when we were meeting, we realized that there was no discussion on the arts. And because there were many artists in this group, we decided to petition to the United Nations and tell them we thought that it was a crucial thing that we needed to have to be talking about arts and women. So when we came home, we were met with this great excitement. It was very exciting in Beijing, and it was very exciting when we came home. And we wanted to share the excitement. We wanted to share the plans that the United Nations had made. They had delineated the major concerns about human rights for women. And we wanted to share those, and we wanted to do that through stories.
Okay, and I know that there were many different art forms that you use, music and theater, puppets, many. So tell you what, let's take a look. Terry, would you join me? Let's take a look at the documentary.
It was the 50th anniversary of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And we put out that call, and we said we wanted to tell the stories of global women who had experienced abuse of their human rights and who had survived. We wanted to focus on telling the stories of survivors. And from that, we got those 3 major productions of the FGM, which the story came from 2 young college students who wrote the first story, and Mary Yang's beautiful story of being a Hmong immigrant and just the hardships she had experienced as living in a war zone and being a woman in a patriarchal culture and as an immigrant, and anyway, her remarkable story and how she has thrived. And then Naima Richmond's story.
And that's what our purpose is, right, really, is to bring these things that we learn and know about through our connections with the world. And for instance, we have so many immigrant people in our community. They have come here from many places in the world, so we sometimes deal with subjects that have to deal with them. And for instance, the whole question of female genital mutilation is illegal in Minnesota. There are laws that have been passed in the United States and in Minnesota. But the immigrant groups then are really sent underground, in a sense, to practice their own culture. And so there's lots going on, and in many ways that we never really see much in the newspapers or in the news at all.
So after coming back, Marilyn met with some of the women locally, and from that we had the discussion about how we as WILPF can do a workshop according to the stories that we heard. The female genital mutilation is really known throughout Africa. It's spread throughout Africa more than any other place. But it is international. It's right here in the United States. It's not even a necessity. It's a tradition that they've carried on.
Do not doubt, my beautiful but troubled daughter. You must follow the same tradition we have followed for centuries. It is the moral thing to do. We must cut in order to make girls more clean and beautiful.
You and your mother and the women of your village have all had the most extreme form of this, what we call infibulation. Think of a rose with petals enfolding the bud.
I do understand. And yes, I do not believe that it is right that she should have to suffer for such a dangerous act.
It's a health issue, a human rights issue. And women are trying to become more empowered about their bodies and having say-so on it.
We made this little play that was about that, and performed it here in the Twin Cities, but also took it to St. Louis to the Triennial National WILPF Congress and presented it there. And a woman from California who was at that meeting took this information back to California and spoke to the woman who is in charge, an Ethiopian woman who is in charge of dealing with this subject in the United States, and seeing about the legality of it and going, she knew everything about it. And so she decided to come to Minneapolis to see our play and to see what was going on here. So she did that, and she stayed 3 or 4 days, and I went around with her to show her what she wanted to see. And we went to the hospitals and talked to doctors and talked to nurses. We went to schools and talked to the teachers who didn't realize that the girls in her class needed special attention sometimes. And we not only opened our own minds and our own talking about this subject, but it's just something that makes us more open to the world and to what's out there.
We put a call out to Minnesota women, and we asked for women who had suffered human rights abuses and survived to share their stories if they wished, and we would work to share them publicly. And we ended up with a number of stories, but we chose 3 to turn into performance pieces. This is the story of Mary Yang. And Mary is a Hmong woman who grew up in Laos, in the villages. This is her story about the peaceful life. As a little girl, she could not go to school. Her brothers could go, but she wanted to go really badly, and she couldn't go because she was a girl, and she had to help her mom carry water and fuel. Here here the bombs and the warfare has come to the village, and the children go out at night. Her marriage consisted of being kidnapped when she was 14 and taken to a neighboring village. And after that, she was not allowed to come home. Later, she and her 2 children would try to cross the Mekong. She has bamboo under her arms to help her because she doesn't know how to swim. And the journey took about, she thinks, about 8 hours in turbulent waters. Here's the Cambodian camps and her trip to the United States. Her story is really remarkable, with all kinds of pitfalls. And she not only learned her English, but she learned to drive. She got a medical assistant certification. She was shy and English as a second language, and she wanted to tell the story. And so we figured out that we could hold up these panels, and we'd say, Mary, here's a panel about a beautiful village. And she would tell the story in her own words.
Mary, in this panel, it looks like life in the village is trying to go on as normal. Tell me what's going on with the children playing.
It was a New Year's time in Laos, and me and my friend, we are tossing ball to each other. And my husband come along and grab my hand and take me to a taxi to be his wife.
He grabbed your hand. Were you surprised?
Yes, I said, I'm not ready. I still want to stay with my parents, but hey, just don't listen to me and take me to a taxi. They take me home. I was so sad, but I had to stay with him for 3 days. After 3 days later, him and a few men come with us to my parents' house for discuss the wedding party. I asked my dad that I don't like him, I don't want to marry him, I don't want to go with him home. And my dad said he already take me home for 3 days, and that is our culture. I cannot stay with him anymore.
Wow, she really went through some real struggles. I know she had to overcome a lot of obstacles, and I just wonder, can you tell us, can you maybe give us an update on Mary's life today?
She was a most amazing woman, and we ended the film. She was doing really well. She had gotten a job as a medical assistant. She was a well-respected person in her community. And shortly afterward, her husband had a stroke. And she was able to continue working for a short time, part-time, and her daughters helped her take care of him. But he soon became immobile and nonverbal. And so she's home caring for him again. She said to me, I have to admit that I've had a very hard life. That was the first time we'd ever heard her say that. She says that she would like to return to work, even if it was as a volunteer, that she so loved her job and her old life. She also said that she would like the Arts Committee women to help her bring her children over to St. Kate's Library, to the archives, so she could share the panels that we made together with them. And we talked about the possibility of putting those panels into a book with her.
That would be wonderful. I'm sure she would really enjoy seeing that again as well. Well, there's so many stories. Let's take a look at some more. Okay?
Okay.
And then we became involved with Janica Vandergeld, who is an internationally known composer and teaches at Hamline University and at the Purpridge Arts High School. And when we do things with Janica, they get very big, very fast. The school took on the project of working with war and women and children and the effects of war on families.
So at the time, I was in Australia, and somehow when I was there, I got connected up with a woman who was part of the larger global organization of WILPF in Sydney. And she had some interesting video documentation of her trip on the peace train that went from Helsinki to Beijing. I called her up out of the blue, and I told her who I was and that I was interested in her experiences. And so she invited me over, and showed me some of the video footage, and then she apparently had this book that was actually published here in Minnesota. She had picked up this book, Seeing the World Through Women's Eyes, which were accounts, poetry accounts of different people's experiences from the peace train. And I think it was through her that I actually came in contact with this book, and then found the texts that I wanted to set in the piece of music that became Beijing Shai Hong, piece for SATB choir, Chinese pipa, violin, narrator, soprano soloist. And it's about a 10-minute piece that was premiered on the Women of Substance series at O'Shaughnessy in 1998. What I still remember to this day was at the premiere, all of these women showed up that I'd never met before, like Naima and Marilyn and just all the women from the arts committee. And they were dressed so beautifully in colors that were just, vibrant. And I just remember, I was just awestruck by these women, and they all came up and talked to me, and they were so pleased that I had set this piece of music, and that was the beginning of a very long relationship with them. From there, the Minnesota Chorale had this opportunity to apply for a Meet the Composer grant, which was based in New York, and it was a national program that put composers in residence with different organizations, multiple organizations in different communities. And so we put together a proposal that included WILPF. It included the Purpose Arts High School, the Chamber Music Society of Minnesota, and the Minnesota Chorale as 4 partnering organizations. And we got it. We got the grant. It was a 3-year full-time position for me to be involved with all these organizations doing projects. And so that then spawned the story of Mary Yang. It was a story that really explored the social costs of war. And it was the perfect thing to take into the Purpose Arts High School. It became a year-long kind of exploration of the theme. The students generated a lot of original material, texts and music and choreography, and we ended up putting together a performance piece based on Mary Yang's story that was presented in many different contexts and venues.
We also connect with other organizations in our own community. Besides Mimi Ramsey, we met with Agitu Wudajo, who runs the International Women's Self-Reliance Organization. She's from Ethiopia and works with Ethiopian women. And she was trained to work with what's called traditional practices and how to eradicate them by the United Nations. She took her training in Italy. She was from Ethiopia and then went back to her community. And so early on, she worked with us too to learn and like most things and many things with women, it's an economic issue where the traditionist that's her way of supporting herself. And so the UN's method is to train those women who are doing that to do some midwifery work.
And another factor that came into this is people of one culture, namely ours, white culture, dealing with cultural activities in other cultures. And that's an issue in itself that we had to deal with.
Part of our mission is about better relationships racially. So I'm being a member of WILPF. We decided to do a documentary of Naima, being that I grew up doing a lot of segregation in the South. So this is my story. I told about growing up in Atlanta and how I as a child, remember going to the grocery store and buying merchandise for my mother. And if I came home without a receipt or a bag, I had to walk all the way back. My mother said, put it in a bag. If I didn't get a receipt, go back, tell Mr. Feinberg, your mother said, give you a receipt. And he'd just stand there and blink and reach under and give me a bag or give me a receipt. But her reason was, she said that white folks thought that black folks stole. That is your way of having proof that you did not steal. That was embedded in me so deeply to today. At age 73, I'm still demanding my receipt in my bag. And another was remembering growing up and going to the drugstore and wanting an ice cream cone. Well, I could buy the ice cream, but I could not sit in the drugstore and eat it like the white folks could. I don't know if you remember, you could buy double cones, and I'd buy a double cone, and I'd try to walk home with that double cone with the ice cream dripping down my arm, because I wasn't allowed to sit in the drugstore and eat my ice cream. So that was one way of discrimination. I remember being on the streetcar, and I get on, and being a child, you know, you're not cognizant of where to sit, so I sat at the front. I get excited. It does not stop for us. I don't know why. Mom, I said, why did the streetcar man not wait and let us get on? Well, she said, there's a big sign in the window for whites only. So we wait and wait. Finally, I see a streetcar coming. I get excited, jumping up and down. The streetcar stops, this time for us. I hurry on and take my seat in the front. And my mother took me by my hand and said, no, you can't sit there. You see that sign at the bus, or the streetcar rather at that time. It says colored at the back. So we had to go to the back. White restroom, white dressing room, black colored dressing room. And I got to thinking after I grew up, how intelligent is that we are discriminated that way, and yet I'm trying on the same clothes that you're trying on, or I'm cooking your food, you eat the food that I cook for you, but I can't sit at the table with you. It's not a comfortable feeling. And of course, I know you know all the things that are happening today. And race is a big issue. It plays a big part even today. Today, it seems like there's a regression. I think the main purpose of this was to let people to know today how slavery has impacted even today, how whites are still privileged today, whether they realize it or not. But again, we have people who are working toward helping to eradicate racism, which is good.
WILPF National does a great deal of work on anti-nuclear legislation and arms, munitions disarmament, and so we follow those kinds of things from a national and international perspective.
Really, we're working with people out there in the community to educate them after we learn to tell them about the issues, and it's like that's how change occurs anyway. All change really comes from the bottom, and so we're looking for people in the community to be talking to their legislators and representatives.
When I came back, I did several presentations in the local community that I was living in for different groups who wanted me. We in the United States aren't exposed to some of the dramatic differences between countries in terms of living standards and other things, and don't take seriously the problems that they have. And yet, in reality, if it affects one country, it affects all of us in some way or form. Here, then, sooner or later, it will make a difference. And if they are not treating women well in Russia, it makes a difference to us all over the world.
In Beijing, at the women's conference, the women from Yugoslavia and Jerusalem were marching as women in black, calling attention to the warfare and the violence in their cultures. So we came home to St. Paul in Minneapolis, and we began to do the same thing. We did this in colleges, in high schools, at PV Plaza in downtown Minneapolis. Often they were silent vigils, and we had one speaker or somebody who passed out pamphlets saying what we were doing. But then we morphed into some other things, and here we are. Marilyn Cuneo, our fearless leader, began to write some scripts, and there's a beautiful script. This was an art show, a plea for peace on Hiroshima and Nagasaki with Julia Barclay's artwork. And she was the first American artist to be represented at the Hiroshima Memorial. Here we're at the May Day Parade. Here we're in PV Plaza. So we've continued to do this and encourage women to do it. All over the world, for many years, women were doing this on Thursdays in Black.
Wow, Terry, I must say, what an amazing group of women. The wonderful work that you've done. And this is just the second part of this documentary. There's one more to come. Terry, if women want to get more involved, what would you suggest?
St. Catherine's has the archives of the Women's Art Committee, and a copy of the film is online for free, and so they can get that kind of information there.
Wow.
And go for it.
Terry, it's been such a pleasure having you here today with us. And again, you know, we're going to see the third part of the film this next time with more of your art projects. Really appreciate all you've done and how you've influenced women. And thank you again for coming on.
And thank you, Beverly, for all you've done for making women's lives a better place, and for the It's a Woman's World program and all the staff there.
Thank you so much. And with that, I want to thank you viewers for joining us, and I hope you join us next month for the third part of this series on It's a Woman's World.